The rancher was invited by the Apache widow on Christmas Eve, ending the night in the same bed. John lived alone on the edge of the town, far from the nearest neighbors, in a small, sturdy cabin that he had built with his own hands many years ago. The cabin was simple, with wooden walls that creaked slightly in the wind, a stone fireplace that filled the room with warmth, and windows that looked out over the wide, open fields and rolling hills of his ranch. Every morning he would wake up before sunrise, hear the faint hoot of an owl or the soft rustle of leaves, and begin his day. His life was quiet, simple, and routine, but it was also hard. The ranch required constant attention. The fences needed mending, the animals needed feeding, and the land needed care. John loved the work because it gave him purpose, but it was also lonely. He didn't have family living nearby, and most of his friends were scattered across town. They were busy with their own lives, their own families, and their own celebrations. John understood this, and he didn't mind it most of the time. But sometimes, on nights like Christmas Eve, the silence felt heavier. John liked to rise early and take care of the animals before the sun even peeked over the horizon. He would start with the cows, checking each one to make sure they were healthy and calm. He knew each animal by sight and by sound, and he treated them with patience and care. He would feed the horses, brushing their coats until they gleamed and speaking softly to them as he worked. Then he would check the fences, walking long stretches of land to ensure that nothing had broken during the night. These walks were long, sometimes tiring, but they gave him time to think and reflect. The winter air was cold, crisp, and clear, and he could see his breath forming small clouds in front of his face as he walked through the fields. On this particular Christmas Eve, the ranch looked different than usual. A fresh layer of snow had fallen the night before, covering the fields with a soft white blanket. The trees were heavy with snow on their branches, bending slightly under the weight, and the sky was a pale gray, promising a quiet night ahead. The snow made everything seem peaceful, almost magical, and for a moment, John allowed himself to enjoy the beauty of the land he worked so hard to maintain. Even with the beauty around him, John felt a twinge of loneliness. He had lived like this for many years, and he was used to it. But on nights when the rest of the town was celebrating with family, the quietness of his cabin made him think of the warmth and laughter he often missed. He remembered the Christmases of his youth, when the house had been full of cousins, uncles, aunts, and the smell of baked goods and roasted meat. Those days felt far away now, almost like another life entirely. He didn't regret his choices. He had chosen a life of independence, of peace, and of honest work, but he could not deny that he sometimes wished for company, even just for a single night. John's cabin reflected the life he led. Inside, it was cozy but simple. A few chairs were placed near the fireplace, which was currently crackling and sending a warm glow across the room. There was a wooden table with scratches from years of use, a bookshelf with a small collection of worn books, and a few photographs of his parents and childhood friends pinned carefully to the wall. Everything had a place and everything was neat, because John believed that order brought calm. He was a man of habit, a man of routine, and that order helped him manage both the ranch and his life. He spent the day preparing for the night in the way he always did. He tended to the animals until they were settled for the evening, then returned to the cabin to light the fireplace and make a small meal for himself. Dinner was usually simple: bread, cheese, and sometimes meat he had preserved, but he ate slowly, savoring each bite. As he sat by the fire, he thought about the quiet outside, the soft snowfall, and the empty land around him. In moments like this, he often felt a strange mix of contentment and longing. The work he did was meaningful, the land was beautiful, but he could not escape the feeling that something was missing. As the evening progressed, John cleaned up his meal and prepared for the night. The snow continued to fall softly outside, covering the tracks he had made earlier and leaving the world looking untouched and new. He looked out the window and noticed how peaceful everything appeared, and he felt a small sense of gratitude. Despite the loneliness, he had a life he loved, a place he could call his own, and the freedom to make his own choices. But even in this gratitude, he felt the familiar pull of isolation. He thought about the families in town, about the laughter and music that would be filling homes at that very moment. He imagined people sitting together around decorated tables, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. The thought made him smile softly, but also reminded him of how quiet his own life had become. John decided to take one last walk before nightfall. He bundled up in his coat, scarf, and gloves, stepping outside into the cold air. The snow crunched beneath his boots, and he inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp winter air fill his lungs. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky, small pinpricks of light above the vast, silent fields. As he walked along the edge of his property, he noticed the way the snow glittered in the fading light, the way the trees stood like silent sentinels over the land. It was a moment of calm, a reminder of why he had chosen this life. He returned to his cabin as darkness fell completely, the fire now casting long shadows across the walls. He sat down in his favorite chair, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, and allowed himself to simply be. There were no visitors, no laughter, no music, only the crackling fire, the softly falling snow, and the thoughts in his own mind. It was peaceful, but it was also lonely. And in that loneliness, John felt the quiet hope that perhaps the night held something unexpected, something that could bring a small warmth to his life that had long been missing. As he stared into the fire, he heard the faint sound of footsteps in the snow outside. He paused, his heart beating a little faster. Perhaps it was a neighbor or someone lost in the snow, or perhaps it was nothing at all. But the sound filled him with curiosity and a small sense of anticipation. He realized that, even in the quietest lives, unexpected moments could arrive when least expected, moments that could change the course of the night, and perhaps even bring a touch of connection to his otherwise solitary life. And so, as the fire continued to glow and the snow continued to fall, John waited, unsure of what the night might bring, but quietly hoping that it would bring more than just the usual silence. It was Christmas Eve, a night of warmth, tradition, and the possibility of surprises. And John, the lone rancher, was ready to find out if this quiet night might finally hold something more. As John sat in his cabin, the fire crackling softly and the snow falling gently outside, he thought about the faint sound he had heard earlier, the soft crunch of footsteps in the snow. At first he had dismissed it as the wind or an animal, but then he heard it again, slower this time, deliberate, moving closer toward the edge of his property. Curiosity grew inside him, mixing with the familiar loneliness he had been feeling all evening. He stepped outside, careful to pull on his coat and gloves, and walked toward the sound. The cold air nipped at his cheeks, and his boots made soft prints in the fresh snow. As he reached the edge of the field, he saw a figure standing in the distance, framed by the pale glow of the winter sky. It was a woman, her coat long and thick, and her hair dark against the snow. She raised her hand in greeting, and her smile was warm, gentle, and unassuming. "Good evening," she called softly, her voice carrying across the quiet landscape. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." John shook his head, feeling a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "Not at all," he said. "I just heard footsteps. I wasn't expecting anyone tonight." The woman nodded. "I didn't mean to startle you. My name is Mrs. Red Elk. I live nearby, not too far from here. I was just walking home, and I thought I would check on the ranch. I know this land has been yours for a long time." John felt a quiet sense of recognition. He had seen her in town before, attending small gatherings, always kind but reserved. She was well known in the community as a widow who lived a quiet life, raising her children and keeping her home with care. He had never spoken to her, but he had always respected the calm strength she carried. "I'm John," he said simply, extending a hand. "It's nice to meet you." She shook his hand gently. "It's nice to meet you too. I don't usually bother anyone on Christmas Eve, but I thought, well, it can be a lonely night for some, and I wanted to make sure you weren't alone. I was wondering if you might join me for a small Christmas gathering. Nothing big, just a warm fire, some food and company." "You're welcome to come if you'd like." John paused, considering the invitation. It was unexpected and a little outside his comfort zone. He was used to quiet evenings in his cabin, with nothing but the fire and the snow. The thought of visiting someone else's home, meeting her family and sharing a Christmas evening felt strange, but it also felt right. There was a kindness in her eyes, a sincerity in her voice that made the idea appealing rather than uncomfortable. "I'd be honored," he said finally. "Thank you for inviting me." Mrs. Red Elk's smile widened. "Wonderful, let me show you the way, it's not far." They walked together, the snow crunching softly beneath their feet, following a narrow path that led through the fields. The night was quiet, almost magical, with the falling snow creating a soft, white haze that softened the edges of the world. The stars twinkled faintly above, and the cold air was fresh and crisp. John felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't excitement in the traditional sense. It was something quieter, deeper, a hope for connection, for warmth, for a reminder that life could hold unexpected moments. As they approached Mrs. Red Elk's home, John noticed the small details that made her house feel welcoming. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something sweet, perhaps baking or spiced tea. The windows glowed softly, offering a glimpse of warmth and light against the dark night outside. Decorations were simple but meaningful, handmade ornaments, a modest wreath on the door, and candles that flickered gently on the windowsill. The house seemed alive with quiet celebration, a stark contrast to the emptiness of his own cabin. Mrs. Red Elk opened the door and welcomed him inside. The warmth of the house was immediate and comforting, and John felt the chill of the night melt from his body as he stepped onto the soft rugs near the entrance. She gestured for him to hang his coat and make himself comfortable, and he did so, appreciating the small gesture of hospitality. Inside, the home smelled of baked bread, roasting vegetables, and a hint of cinnamon. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with a golden glow. There was a small table set with simple dishes, and a few chairs were arranged around the room. The atmosphere was calm and inviting, with a quiet energy that spoke of careful preparation and a welcoming heart. Mrs. Red Elk introduced John to her children, who were sitting quietly near the fireplace, drawing and writing in notebooks. They were shy at first, watching the stranger with curiosity, but John greeted them gently, asking about their day and complimenting their drawings. Slowly, the children relaxed, and John felt a warmth in his chest as he realized how natural it felt to be part of this small, intimate gathering. They sat together by the fire, sharing simple food and conversation. Mrs. Red Elk spoke about her own experiences, raising her children after the loss of her husband, and the challenges she faced balancing work, home, and family. John shared stories from the ranch, the long days of caring for the animals, the satisfaction of a job well done, and the quiet beauty of the land he loved. Conversation flowed easily, each story met with nods, questions, or laughter. John noticed how effortlessly Mrs. Red Elk listened, her eyes attentive, her smile genuine. There was no judgment, no pretense, only a sincere interest in understanding and connecting. It was a quality he had not often encountered, and he felt a deep sense of respect and admiration growing inside him. The children began to share stories of their own, funny moments at school, small adventures in the snow, and dreams for the future. John listened, genuinely engaged, and occasionally offered advice or encouragement. The atmosphere was warm, lively, and comforting, and John realized that the evening had already begun to feel special, in a way he had not expected when he first left his cabin. After the meal, Mrs. Red Elk suggested they step outside for a moment to enjoy the quiet beauty of the snowy night. John agreed, curious to see the world beyond the warm glow of the fire. They walked through the snow-covered yard, the children trailing behind, their laughter echoing softly in the still night. The moon had risen, casting a silver light over the fields and trees, making the snow sparkle like tiny diamonds. They stood for a moment, simply taking in the peaceful scene. John felt a sense of calm wash over him, a quiet happiness he had not felt in years. The conversation slowed, replaced by shared silence, and he realized how rare it was to feel so completely at ease with another person. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the simple comfort of human presence and the soft magic of a quiet Christmas night. As they returned indoors, John felt a growing sense of gratitude. He had come expecting a simple visit, perhaps a brief respite from the quiet of his cabin. Instead, he had found warmth, laughter, connection, and a reminder that life could still surprise him. Mrs. Red Elk's home was more than just a place. It was a reflection of her kindness, her resilience, and her ability to create comfort and joy even in the face of challenges. As the evening wore on, the fire crackled softly, casting gentle shadows across the room. John sat back, listening to the quiet murmur of conversation, the occasional laughter of children, and the comforting sounds of a home alive with care and attention. He realized that this night, unexpected as it had been, was a gift, an opportunity to experience the warmth of companionship, the joy of shared stories, and the quiet magic of human connection. And as he looked around, he understood something he hadn't fully admitted to himself before. Even a life built on solitude, hard work, and routine could still hold moments of wonder, of laughter, and of connection. All it took was an unexpected invitation, an open heart, and the willingness to step beyond the familiar into the possibility of something new. After stepping back into the warmth of the house, John felt a sense of ease he had not experienced in years. The cold from the snow and the crisp air outside melted away the moment he sat near the fire. Mrs. Red Elk offered him a cup of hot cider, its spicy aroma filling the room and adding to the comforting atmosphere. He held the cup carefully, feeling the heat seep into his hands, and took a small sip. The warmth spread through his chest, not just from the drink, but from the kindness surrounding him. Mrs. Red Elk's children had settled back to their own quiet activities, but the room still felt lively. Small decorations glimmered softly in the firelight, and the faint sound of a wind chime by the window added a delicate touch to the evening. John looked around, noticing the careful thought she had put into every detail, simple yet meaningful. It was clear that even in a life filled with challenges, she had found ways to create warmth and beauty. "Would you like to hear a story, Mrs. Red Elk asked suddenly, her eyes twinkling. John nodded, intrigued. She smiled and began to speak, her voice calm and steady, carrying a quiet strength that made every word feel important. She told stories of her life after her husband's passing, the lessons she had learned, and the challenges of raising her children alone. She spoke not with sadness, but with a sense of resilience and grace, showing how she had navigated difficult times with patience and determination. John listened intently, feeling a mix of admiration and curiosity. He had always known life could be tough, but hearing her stories gave him a deeper understanding of what it meant to face hardships with courage. He noticed the way her eyes softened when she spoke of her children, the pride and love shining through her words. It was a side of her he had not expected, a quiet vulnerability paired with remarkable strength. When she paused, John found himself sharing his own stories. He spoke of the ranch, of the long days spent caring for the animals, and of the satisfaction that came from seeing the land thrive. He told her about the winters when the snow piled high and the wind howled through the hills, and how he would often work alone for hours, finding peace in the rhythm of his tasks. He spoke of the simple joys, like watching a calf take its first steps or seeing the sunset reflect off a frozen pond. Mrs. Red Elk listened carefully, nodding occasionally and asking questions. She seemed genuinely interested, leaning in slightly whenever he described something that had clearly touched him deeply. John felt a sense of relief. Finally, someone was listening to his life, not just hearing the words but understanding the effort, the care, and the quiet happiness that came from it. As the conversation flowed, they began to share laughter. Mrs. Red Elk told stories of childhood adventures, some silly, some embarrassing, and John couldn't help but laugh at the vivid images she painted. He shared a few amusing incidents from his own past, including moments when he had clumsily tried to fix a fence or herd stubborn animals. The laughter filled the room, warm and unforced, weaving a bond between them that neither had expected when the evening began. The children, now intrigued by the sound of their mother and John laughing, came closer, drawn to the warmth and joy. Mrs. Red Elk encouraged them to join in, and soon they were telling their own little stories. Funny moments from school, playful pranks they had tried, and dreams of adventures they wished to have. John listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions or offering gentle advice. The room was alive with connection, the firelight dancing across their faces, creating a sense of family and community in a way John had long missed. At one point, Mrs. Red Elk shared a story about a Christmas many years ago when her husband had surprised her with a small gift, something simple but thoughtful. She described the joy she had felt, the way a small act of kindness could carry so much meaning. John smiled, realizing that the warmth of human connection was often found in the simplest moments, the shared laughter, the thoughtful gesture, the act of listening. Encouraged by her openness, John shared a story from his own past, about a friend he had grown up with in town. They had spent long summer days exploring the fields and learning about the animals on his family's farm. There had been adventures, mishaps, and moments of pure joy. Even though time had passed and the friend had moved away, the memory remained vivid, a reminder of the bonds that could form through shared experiences and trust. The conversation gradually shifted from stories of the past to reflections on life in general. John spoke about the solitude of ranch life, how it could be both peaceful and lonely, and how he had learned to find contentment in his work. Mrs. Red Elk nodded in understanding, sharing how she too had faced moments of solitude after her husband's passing, and how she had found ways to remain connected, to her children, to her community, and to herself. Their dialogue was natural, unhurried, and genuine, with each word carrying meaning and care. At one point, John noticed the way Mrs. Red Elk's eyes softened when she spoke of her family, the way her voice carried pride and warmth. He realized that her strength was not just in what she had endured, but in how she had transformed her experiences into lessons and love. It was a quality he deeply admired, one that made him feel both respect and a quiet sense of closeness. As the night continued, they shared small traditions. Mrs. Red Elk brought out homemade cookies and spiced tea, inviting John to join in the simple pleasure of tasting the treats. They talked about favorite holiday memories, childhood games, and little rituals that brought joy during the cold winter months. John found himself relaxing completely, laughing freely, and appreciating the comfort of being fully present with someone who understood both the quiet and the joy of life. Time seemed to slow as they continued their conversation. The fire crackled gently, casting a golden glow across the room, and the snow continued to fall softly outside. John realized he had not felt this kind of connection in a long time, someone who listened, who laughed, who shared stories and warmth without expectation or judgment. The evening felt timeless, suspended in a space where only human connection mattered, where the past and present intertwined in laughter, memory, and understanding. At one point, Mrs. Red Elk shared a small story about the lessons she had learned from her life: patience, resilience, and the importance of cherishing moments with loved ones. John listened, feeling a quiet resonance with her words. His life on the ranch had taught him many of these same lessons, though in a different way. The connection between them felt natural, as if two lives with similar rhythms and values had found a meeting point on this quiet Christmas Eve. John found himself opening up more than he expected, speaking of dreams he rarely shared with anyone. He spoke of the hope that someday, even in a quiet life, companionship and warmth could be a constant presence. He spoke of the desire to be understood, to share both work and leisure, to find someone who could appreciate both the hardships and the small joys of life. Mrs. Red Elk listened with a gentle smile, encouraging him without pressing, showing that she understood the balance of hope and patience in life. The children, now sleepy, had quietly retreated to their beds, leaving John and Mrs. Red Elk alone in the soft glow of the firelight. The atmosphere shifted slightly, more intimate yet still warm and safe. They continued to talk softly, sharing reflections, hopes, and quiet laughter. There was no rush, no pressure, only the steady rhythm of conversation and the comfort of mutual respect and understanding. John realized, as he sipped his second cup of cider and watched the firelight dance across the room, that this evening was more than just a simple invitation. It was a reminder that connection, kindness, and understanding could appear unexpectedly, even in the quietest corners of life. He felt a growing warmth in his chest, not just from the fire or the cider, but from the human bond that had begun to form, a bond built on shared stories, laughter, and the quiet magic of attention and care. As the night deepened, John and Mrs. Red Elk continued to share moments of quiet conversation, sometimes punctuated by laughter, sometimes by thoughtful silence. Each story, each word, each small gesture of attention added to the growing sense of connection, making the evening feel longer, richer, and more meaningful. John felt grateful, not just for the invitation, but for the chance to experience the warmth of human companionship, a feeling he had long thought would only exist in memory. By the time the clock neared midnight, John realized that the evening had brought something he had not anticipated, not just laughter and stories, but a genuine sense of belonging. In this simple home, surrounded by warmth, firelight, and genuine human connection, he had found a rare and precious gift, the comfort of being truly seen, heard, and understood. After spending a few hours near the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflections, Mrs. Red Elk suggested stepping outside for a short walk. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the ground crisp and sparkling under the light of the moon. John agreed, eager to stretch his legs and enjoy the serene beauty of the winter night. He bundled up once again in his coat, gloves, and scarf, and followed her out the door. The moment they stepped outside, John felt the calmness of the snow-covered landscape wash over him. The world was quiet, almost perfectly still, except for the faint creaking of trees under the weight of snow and the distant call of a night bird. The moon cast a silver glow across the fields, making the snow glimmer like tiny diamonds. John took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs and the peacefulness of the night settle into his heart. Mrs. Red Elk walked beside him, her hands tucked into her pockets, her breath forming small clouds in the chilly air. She seemed perfectly at ease in the winter night, moving gracefully across the uneven snow, her steps careful and deliberate. John felt a sense of admiration for her calm confidence, and he noticed that the quiet walk allowed a different kind of connection to grow, one that did not need words, yet was filled with shared understanding. For a few moments, they walked silently, each lost in thought but aware of the other's presence. John observed the way her eyes reflected the moonlight, and how her small smile suggested comfort and contentment. He realized that sometimes silence could speak more than words. There was no need to force conversation. The simple act of being together, enjoying the beauty of the night, was enough to create a bond. Finally, Mrs. Red Elk spoke softly. "I love nights like this," she said. "They remind me of how peaceful life can be if we allow ourselves to slow down and notice the small things, the snow, the quiet, the stars." John nodded, agreeing. "It's easy to forget the quiet when you're busy," he said. "Out here with the ranch, it's usually just me and the animals. Nights like this make me appreciate the stillness and the company." She looked at him, her expression warm and kind. "I can understand that. Life often keeps us busy, and we forget to pause and breathe. I think that's why evenings like this are so special. They give us a chance to just be." The conversation was calm, gentle, and meaningful. John felt a sense of ease, a trust that had grown naturally throughout the evening. It was as if the snow-covered world around them created a quiet bubble, shielding them from worries and distractions, and allowing their connection to deepen without hurry or pressure. As they walked further, the children had chosen to stay indoors, cozy and warm, so it was just the two of them moving through the soft, undisturbed snow. Each step left a clear print, a mark of their shared journey through the quiet night. John noticed how the moonlight illuminated the landscape, making familiar fields look magical and new. He felt a rare sense of wonder, the kind he remembered from childhood, when snow had transformed the world into something enchanted and full of possibility. They reached a small clearing where the snow was especially untouched, stretching out like a smooth white blanket. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint sound of wind rustling through distant trees. They stopped and simply stood there, side by side, taking in the beauty of the scene. John realized that he had never experienced a night like this, so quiet, so peaceful, and so full of subtle meaning. "I used to come out here with my husband, Mrs. Red Elk said softly, breaking the silence. "We would walk in the snow just like this. It was simple, but it felt like the world was ours for a moment. I try to remember those times, especially when the nights feel long." John listened quietly, sensing the weight of her words. He didn't speak immediately, unsure of what to say, but he simply stood beside her, feeling the connection without needing to fill the silence with words. There was a comfort in this shared understanding, a recognition of life's challenges and joys, and the ability to simply be present with another person. After a while, John finally spoke. "I think that's what makes nights like this so meaningful," he said. "It's not just the snow or the moon or even the quiet. It's the feeling that someone else understands, that someone else is here with you." She nodded, smiling softly. "Exactly. Even when words aren't spoken, it's enough to know that you're not alone." The simplicity of her words resonated with him. John realized that for all his years of living alone, he had been missing this kind of connection, not in a dramatic or grand way, but in quiet companionship, shared presence and understanding. He felt a warmth in his chest, not from the fire or the drink, but from the subtle, growing bond between them. They continued walking slowly, letting their steps fall naturally in the snow. Occasionally, one of them would point out a sparkling icicle, a frozen patch of pond, or a distant hill glowing under the moonlight. They laughed softly at small observations, the sound blending with the quiet night. The shared experience was gentle, meaningful, and full of a kind of joy that came not from spectacle, but from presence and attentiveness. At one point, they reached a small bench at the edge of the clearing. Mrs. Red Elk suggested sitting for a few minutes, and they did, letting the night envelop them in its serene beauty. John noticed the way she seemed completely at ease, the way she let herself simply observe and enjoy the moment. He, too, felt the tension of the day melt away, replaced by calmness, reflection, and the quiet happiness of companionship. They talked a little while longer, sharing thoughts about life, work, family, and memories of winters past. John spoke of long nights on the ranch, of the animals, and of quiet moments of observation when he felt connected to the world in a small but meaningful way. Mrs. Red Elk shared stories of her own experiences, of patience, resilience, and the small joys that life offered when one paid attention. Their words were simple, honest, and comforting. After a time, they stood again and began to walk back toward the house. The snow had softened further, creating a smooth path, and the world seemed almost dreamlike under the pale moonlight. John felt a sense of gratitude for this evening, for this unexpected invitation, and for the chance to experience the quiet beauty of connection with someone who understood the balance of solitude and companionship. When they reached the porch, John paused, looking back at the clearing one last time. "It's beautiful out there," he said quietly. "I don't think I've ever seen it like this." Mrs. Red Elk smiled, her breath forming a small cloud in the cold air. "It is. Nights like this remind us to appreciate what we have, to notice the small things and to share them when we can. I'm glad you came with me." John nodded, feeling a quiet sense of understanding and trust. The walk had not been about words or conversation alone. It had been about presence, shared silence, and the gentle strengthening of a bond. He realized that sometimes the most meaningful connections were built not on grand gestures or dramatic moments, but on quiet, attentive companionship. As they entered the warm house again, the glow of the fire welcomed them back. John felt the chill of the night still lingering, but it was now accompanied by the warmth of human connection. He had experienced more in these few hours than he had in months, if not years. The simple joy of being understood, the comfort of shared presence, and the peace that comes from authentic companionship. Mrs. Red Elk offered him another cup of tea, and they settled once more near the fire. The children were asleep, leaving the house quiet but filled with the warmth of comfort and care. John realized that this night, this unexpected invitation, had become something special, a memory he would carry with him, not just for its beauty, but for the reminder that even in a life of solitude, connection, understanding, and quiet joy could be found. As he sipped his tea and watched the fire, John thought about the night's walk, the moonlit fields, and the silence that had spoken so loudly. He understood now that even a single evening, shared with the right person, could change one's perspective, bring unexpected comfort, and leave a lasting impression on the heart. He felt a quiet hope, a sense that perhaps life had more moments like this to offer, and that even in the most solitary of lives, companionship and understanding were possible. The night continued, gentle and calm, with the fire crackling softly and the house filled with quiet warmth. John felt at peace, knowing that he had found a rare and precious connection. The snowy walk, the shared silence, and the gentle understanding between him and Mrs. Red Elk had created a bond that was unspoken yet deeply felt, a bond built on kindness, attentiveness, and the simple beauty of being present with one another. After returning from their moonlit walk, John felt a gentle warmth in his chest, not only from the crisp walk but from the quiet bond he had begun to share with Mrs. Red Elk. The house seemed even more welcoming now, with the fire crackling softly, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls, and the soft scent of baked bread still lingering in the air. The children were tucked in bed, their quiet breathing filling the rooms with the subtle rhythm of life. The night felt complete, but John sensed there was still a small, comforting closeness waiting to be embraced. Mrs. Red Elk motioned for him to sit near the fire again. She brought over another cup of warm tea and a small plate of freshly baked cookies. John accepted gratefully, holding the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth seep slowly into him. They sat together in silence for a few minutes, letting the fire's glow and the soft hum of quiet night sounds create a sense of comfort and ease. It was a silence full of meaning, a shared presence that didn't need words to convey its depth. "I'm glad you came tonight, John," Mrs. Red Elk said softly, breaking the silence. It can be hard living alone, especially during the holidays, but tonight, it feels like the world is just a little warmer because you're here." John felt a warmth spread through him at her words, a feeling that was gentle, comforting, and unexpected. "I'm glad too," he replied quietly. "I didn't know what to expect when I came, but it's been wonderful, more than I imagined." They shared a quiet smile, and John realized that this night had been more than just an invitation to spend time with someone else. It had been an opportunity to experience kindness, understanding, and companionship in its purest form. Even in the simplest gestures, the offering of a cup of tea, a shared laugh, or a story told by the fire, he felt a deep sense of connection that had been missing in his life for years. As the night grew later, John felt a gentle chill from the winter air that had seeped in despite the warmth of the house. Mrs. Red Elk noticed immediately and offered him a blanket to wrap around his shoulders. He accepted, feeling the soft fabric against him, and realized how much comfort could come from even the smallest gestures of care. They sat together, drinking tea, sharing quiet conversation and occasionally glancing at the fire, which seemed to mirror the calm, steady rhythm of their growing bond. The conversation became slower, softer, more reflective. They spoke of memories from their past, not just the joyous ones, but also the moments of struggle, loneliness, and challenge that had shaped them. John spoke of nights spent alone on the ranch, tending to the animals or watching the stars in silence, moments that had felt both peaceful and isolating. Mrs. Red Elk shared stories of raising her children alone, of learning patience and resilience, and of finding joy even in the smallest successes. Each story, each memory, added layers of understanding and trust between them. At one point, John noticed how naturally comfortable he felt sitting beside her. There was no pressure, no expectation, only a quiet, steady companionship that felt rare and precious. Mrs. Red Elk's presence was calming, her voice steady and gentle, and her attention fully focused on the moment they were sharing. John realized that he had not felt this kind of ease in a long time, and he cherished it. The children, safely asleep upstairs, left the house filled with a sense of peace rather than chaos. The quiet allowed John and Mrs. Red Elk to enjoy the simple pleasure of being together, talking softly about hopes, dreams, and the small joys that often went unnoticed in the busy rhythm of life. They laughed occasionally at shared memories or small observations, but most of the night was spent in calm conversation and silent understanding, a companionship that spoke more in presence than in words. John found himself reflecting on the journey that had led him here, from the quiet solitude of his ranch to this warm, inviting home. It had been an evening filled with unexpected kindness, laughter, and connection. He realized that sometimes life's most meaningful moments arrived without warning, and that the true magic of a night like this was in the gentle understanding and trust that grew naturally between people. As the fire burned low and the tea cooled in their cups, Mrs. Red Elk suggested it might be time for John to rest before returning to his cabin. "You must be tired after the walk and the long day on the ranch," she said gently. "There's a spare room here, warm and cozy. You're welcome to rest before heading back. You've earned it." John hesitated for a moment, unused to accepting such invitations. But he saw the sincerity in her eyes, the genuine care behind her words, and he realized that there was no expectation beyond comfort and rest. "Thank you," he said quietly, feeling a sense of gratitude. "I would appreciate that." She guided him to a small, neatly prepared room near the back of the house. The bed was simple, with clean blankets and soft pillows, and the room was filled with the faint warmth of the fire from the main room. John set down his coat and gloves, feeling the comfort of the space and the thoughtful preparation that had gone into it. Mrs. Red Elk gave him a gentle smile before leaving the room, ensuring he had privacy and peace. As John lay down, he felt the weight of the day, the quiet snow, and the warmth of the evening settle over him. The events of the night, the laughter, the stories, the walk under the moon, and the gentle companionship replayed in his mind. He realized that the true gift of the evening was not just the invitation, but the opportunity to feel connected, valued, and understood. Even in the quiet of the room, he could sense the comfort of her presence nearby, a reminder that human connection could be found in the simplest acts of kindness. John reflected on how unusual it was to feel such ease and warmth with someone he had only just met, and yet it felt completely natural. The night had unfolded gently, allowing trust, understanding, and quiet joy to grow without haste or expectation. He drifted into sleep slowly, carrying with him the feeling of safety and calm. It was a peaceful sleep, unburdened by the usual worries or loneliness, and he found himself dreaming not of work or tasks, but of gentle snowfalls, laughter, shared stories, and the quiet comfort of companionship. The night had become a memory he would hold on to, a reminder that even in a life of solitude, moments of warmth, understanding, and human connection could appear when least expected. When John awoke, the first light of morning had begun to filter through the curtains. The house was still quiet, the children sleeping soundly, and the fire reduced to soft embers. He felt rested, comforted, and unexpectedly grateful for the night he had experienced. The invitation, the walk, the stories, and the quiet presence of Mrs. Red Elk had transformed an ordinary Christmas Eve into something extraordinary, a memory filled with warmth, trust, and a sense of belonging. As he prepared to return to his cabin, John paused to reflect on the simple truth he had discovered. Life's most meaningful moments often arrive quietly, in shared smiles, gentle laughter, attentive listening, and the calm of presence. It was not about grand gestures or dramatic events, but about the connection between two people willing to share time, space, and understanding. He felt a renewed sense of hope as he stepped back into the winter morning. The snow that had fallen the night before still blanketed the fields, sparkling in the early light, and the crisp air carried the scent of pine and earth. John realized that the night had given him something he had longed for in the quiet of his cabin, the reminder that even in a life defined by solitude and work, human connection, kindness, and warmth could still be found. Before leaving, he thanked Mrs. Red Elk sincerely, her gentle smile reflecting the shared understanding of the night. "Thank you for everything," he said quietly. "For the stories, the walk, the warmth, and the company. It's been remarkable." She nodded, her eyes kind. "I'm glad you came, John. Nights like this are better when shared, and I'm glad we had this one together." With a final wave, John stepped back into the snow-covered path leading to his ranch. Each step reminded him of the magical, quiet connection he had experienced, the laughter, the stories, the firelight, and the silent understanding that had grown throughout the evening. He carried with him a sense of calm, warmth, and gratitude that would last long after the snow had melted and the winter had passed. Even as he reached the edge of his property and looked back at the glowing windows of Mrs. Red Elk's home, John felt a quiet certainty. The night had been more than an evening spent in company. It had been a reminder of life's gentle, lasting gifts. Trust, kindness, laughter, and the simple comfort of human presence were treasures, and he had experienced them fully on this special Christmas Eve. As he returned to his cabin, the soft crunch of snow beneath his boots echoing in the quiet morning, John realized that the night had left a lasting impression on him. He felt less alone, more connected, and quietly hopeful that life had more moments like this to offer, moments filled with warmth, understanding, and the gentle magic of shared presence.